Good morning. Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us. We're going to allow about 5 minutes so that people can join us. It's not actually our way of doing things, but we'll just wait for 5 minutes so people can join. Now, hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us. My name, as you know, is Olafadike Akeju, and it is my pleasure to welcome you to SLEC Africa's webinar for August with the theme, The Collective Voice, Value of Representation in Africa's Gaming Industry. Now, as many of us know, Africa's gaming and gambling sector has been going through a period of real transformation, particularly this year, as we have seen new regulatory frameworks come up, we have seen shifting tax regimes, and we are seeing markets that are maturing really fast in many jurisdictions. Now, in moments like this, one thing becomes especially clear. No single operator or stakeholder should navigate these changes alone. Today's conversation is about the industry's ability to shape sound policy, to build trust with regulators, and to protect the interest of the people who are working within the sector. Now, all of this depends largely on having a collective voice that speaks with credibility, consistency, and unity. On this call, today on today's webinar, we will be exploring why representation matters for operators who are seeking a genuine seat at the table with the regulators, for employees and professionals across the industry, and for the long-term sustenance of the gaming sector across the African continent. We will also look at what effective representation actually looks like in practice. We'll consider the gaps that still exist and how stronger collective structures can help the industry engage more constructively with policymakers who are shaping the future of the African gaming industry. Now, on this webinar, I am very happy and pleased to be joined by 4 experts, renowned, and also representatives of associations across Africa's gaming industry. So we've got representatives from Nigeria, from Ghana, as well as from Kenya. On the call with us today, we have Gift Twadibofia. She is the Executive Secretary of the Association of Nigerian Bookmakers. You're welcome, Gift. Also on the call,
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. We have Chima Onwuka, who is the President, Nigeria Licensed Lottery Operators Forum. You're welcome. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much for having me.
And also on the call, we've got Dr. Kweku Ainuson, who's also the Executive Secretary of the Ghana Association of Sports Betting Operators. You're welcome, Doctor.
Thank you very much.
And the last but not least is John Mutua, the Chief Executive Officer, Association of Gaming Operators of Kenya. He will be joining us shortly, as incidentally, he's on his way from a court hearing, and he'll be joining us very shortly. Now, we would leave time at the end of this session for your questions. So please feel free to drop your comments, your questions, in the chat, and we'll try as much as possible to get to as many as we can before we close. With that, I'm going to dive right in by going to the lady on the panel, Gift, and asking the question, why should any licensed operator belong to an industry association? And what is an operator missing by remaining outside collective representation.
Thank you very much. Good morning, everyone. Thank you very much, Ma, for the opportunity to be on the webinar today. So firstly, I would say while it's joining an industry association is an ultimate business decision, I firmly believe that every licensed operator benefits from being part of a credible trade association. Why I say this is the gaming industry is highly regulated and constantly is evolving, and the issues around licensing, taxation, responsible gaming, advertising, data protection, and so on affects everyone in the industry. Now, one of the greatest value of being in an association is providing of collective representation. I know individually operators have limited influence in policy making or conversations or engagements with regulators. But when we have a collective voice, when we engage collectively, the regulators, the policymakers, it shapes and balances the regulation. Instead of one person going to meet the regulator, we are speaking in one voice, a collective voice. And secondly, the association also keep members informed about regulatory developments and also provide timely compliance guidance to operators. I'll also say building of capacity through training, policy briefings, stakeholder engagement. All this comes together when we as operators come together as an association. Equally important is to note that the opportunity of collaboration. Through the association, it brings operators together to address common challenges that affect one individual and also the industry. We share best practices. Collectively, we tackle issues around illegal operations, responsible gaming, and regulatory reforms. This also promotes self-regulation for the businesses and also gives ethical business practices in the industry. I would say that operators who remain outside the association, I believe they're missing out a lot, because you get information from the association. When there are things to discuss, when there are industry issues, you get it from the industry. When there's a problem in the industry, the association is there to speak collectively for all operators. And finally, I would also say that ultimately a trade association exists not just only for advocacy, but also to help the long-term sustainability of the industry. Thank you, Ma.
Thank you, Gift. Thank you so much for that contribution. Really insightful. Being a part of a collective representation means that, you all speak with one voice. You can be heard by the regulator, by the government, without putting yourself and your business at risk of being seen as opposing the government. So thank you for that contribution. John is on the call now. You're welcome, John. I am going to come to you, especially given that, certain developments in Kenya in recent time. There's been, release of regulations. Recently, there was a release of a law last year. And off the back of that, I'm sure there's been engagements and things. So could you tell us, African countries have experienced a series of regulatory and fiscal changes in South Africa, in Kenya, Uganda, even Nigeria. There has been a series of changes this year. So what are the key developments in your jurisdiction, which is Kenya, and what has been the contribution of the association, in formulating some of these policies or in implementation?
Okay, thank you so much for having me. It's actually great to have this kind of a conversation. I think for Kenya, there's a lot of eyes at the moment, looking at Kenya and wondering, okay, so what's going on? So this started off, I think about probably some 2 years back, where now the government actually made a positive move to change the law that has been in place, because then the law that we had was actually existing from back in the day, from based on a law that was done in 1966, based entirely on horse racing and casinos. And of course, gaming has evolved, over the years now into completely different discussions away from the horse racing and the land-based operators. So there was an engagement with the industry to change the law, which led now to what we call the Gambling Control Act of 2025. This was actually assented to last year in August, which then basically meant that the previous Betting Control and Licensing Board and the act under which they were operating, which was CAP 131, was basically repealed, and we moved now into a new regime with the Gambling Regulatory Authority. Now, the interesting thing is that having had the act put in place, then there's subsequent, regulations that needed to come into play to basically actualize the act, because certain components of the act are mentioned, but then the regulations are the ones that actually come in and define and prescribe how these components within the act will basically work. For example, when it comes to licensing, the act will define and say these are the license categories. But when it comes to the fees for how much will be paid for each license category, then this is defined by the regulations. So there was a lot of work done again also to put out a set of regulations, 6 in total, including the National Lottery, which was never hadn't been done before. We had regulations on licensing, regulations on basically conduct of business. We had regulations on advertising, regulations basically across the divide, including foreign-based operators. Now, these were now like the key developments, because a lot of people then are wondering, okay, so we're going now into a new licensing regime. And remember, what happened was all licenses expire, they're annual. In Kenya, all licenses are annual, and these expire with the government year, which is at the end of June. So at the end of June, all licenses issued previously, because there's a transition, whatever was issued by the previous act will go on up to its expiry. Once that expires, then you have to now get another license under the new regime. Now, this is where it's become very, very interesting, because the question then is, what has been the contribution of the association in these discussions? And I can assure you that the association has been involved very, very intricately in all the steps that have been taken towards formulating first the act. There was a lot of consultations, invitations for public participation, and even invitations for just about as an association to basically put in our recommendations on the act. And then, of course, this year we were now working on the regulations. Again, the regulator went through the whole process, put out a notice for public participation in the national newspapers, wrote out letters to everybody, the stakeholders, to participate, and we took an active part in that, especially looking at the regulations. For example, I think we pointed out almost 35 or 36 items that we thought needed to be looked at and addressed a bit more keenly. And all of this, the role of the association, what we first did was go back to our members and say, these are the regulations that are proposed. We'd like you to just read through them, and then now we can have another conversation once everybody has read through them and see what are the different issues that touch on each and every operator individually. So after that, of course, we organized for another session with the operators and collected their views. We had our legal team looking through, the whole list, the whole set of regulations. And we made our proposal. We were invited to the public participation by the regulator. We did appear, made a very strong case. There were quite a number of interesting things that were coming out. We put up a really good case on behalf of the operators in Kenya. And after that, of course, then because the lawmaking process is very well guided in government circles. So after they received the public participation, and public participation, I think it needs to be understood, this will come basically from even other stakeholders, not just us as the association. There's also the general public who are also invited to make their contributions, submissions to this. Even some of our own operators, even though we made submissions as the association on behalf of our licensed members, still some of our members felt that there are certain things they really needed to put emphasis on, and they still went on to submit their own, make their own submissions. So that's been the contribution. And I think what has come out is that we've had a very good working relationship with the regulator, with the government, just to ensure that, everything and everybody is basically captured in that whole process of ensuring that the law is developed to meet and enable businesses.
Right. Thank you. Thank you very much, John. I mean, that's quite insightful. Just a quick follow-up question. You mentioned that 35 issues were raised for the regulators and the government and the policymakers to take a look at, review, revise, and consider. My question is, now that the regulations have been released, were some of those observations taken on board? Was what was agreed, what eventually came out of as regulation? So essentially, did that engagement have an impact on the final policy and regulations that we see today?
Absolutely. I mean, the whole idea here was to carry forward, to make it make the regulations enable businesses to continue to operate, and while still protecting the public from adverse effects of gambling. So yes, I think majority of our proposals were considered and incorporated into the final submissions that were done. Some of the things were really easy for the regulator to adopt, and I think those ones they did not even require to do much. And the good thing is, even with some of the submissions that we made, we were also making comparisons in different other jurisdictions, so that it's not just a question of saying this is what we would like for the purposes of just meeting our own likes. No, we were looking at what are the other jurisdictions doing, what would be the impact of this besides now and also in the future, because then once the regulations are in place, it will take a bit of time for this to be looked at again. So yes, there was a very good consideration on the majority of the issues that we put forward.
Right. Thank you very much for that. Chima, I'm going to come to you just to find out and ask, in the Nigerian environment, there's also been a series of regulatory as well as fiscal changes, some of them still ongoing. What is the role of the association in all of this, and what impact has the associations that exist, what has that had on some of those changes and policy revisions that are ongoing?
Okay, thank you very much. I think the major thing for Nigeria is the decentralization of the lottery license in Nigeria, which the Supreme Court did 2 years ago, and it took the states and ceded the powers to states to regulate lottery and gaming in Nigeria. That has come with a lot of new gray areas to navigate, and it took almost the whole of 2025 to try to navigate it. And in the process, the regulators came together to form an association, FGSR, to try to remove some of the uncertainties that came up with the Supreme Court judgment. And within that time, we engaged with them on licensing fees. Major issues were licensing fees, duration of license fees, and the amounts to be paid, and to see also, it's just like in every institution, in every association, there's the big and the small. The smaller ones, whom, like there was a case of somebody that said, okay, with this judgment, I don't need to operate everywhere in the country. I'm going to go regional. I don't need a license to operate everywhere. So how do I go about it? Do I register with every state? Do I register? But the big ones, we are comfortable with the issue of FGSR, which gives them access to almost all the states in terms of licensing and compliance. So we had to come into that, both the Lottery Forum and AMB, to try to protect the interests of those that don't. Up till now, the issue is still there. In fact, that's the major thing this year. To try to protect the interests of those who are not capable financially and infrastructure-wise to operate around the whole country, and have chosen to work in smaller areas. And even as of 3-4 weeks ago, that something came up again. If I decide to work in a state and I go online, okay, which almost everybody is online now, and not land retail anymore. Who regulates me if my sticker or somebody carrying my app goes beyond a particular state line? So that is one of the things we are looking at now. It's a great area that we need to understand, because people who, especially the indigenous companies, are willing to operate in states, but they have to go online. If they go online, how are they classified? Is it still a state license, or is it a national license? So these are some of the things we are looking at, and the regulators are cooperating, because for them also it's a gray area. Initially, we had the national license, which covered every aspect of the federation. So you could go online with a federal license, or even a state license in some cases, and nobody bothers you. But now some states are saying no. If you are online in my state, you have to pay to me. If I see you online in my state, I will declare you illegal. So these are some of the challenges we are facing in Nigeria right now. But like you rightly said earlier, we are still navigating it. We are still working on them to see how it goes.
Okay, thank you very much for that contribution. One thing I picked up from what you said was the moment that Supreme Court judgment clarified that the power to regulate belonged to the states, some state regulators came together to form an association. That's the State Federation of State Gaming Regulators of Nigeria, and then offered a license, a single license that allows operators, a universal license that allowed them to operate in multiple states. But you did say that, yes, whilst it was easy for some of the bigger operators to do that, it wasn't the same for the smaller operators. But you, as an association, your mandate, your approach has been to take a position whereby the interest of not just the big operators, but also the smaller operators are, taken into consideration, and everyone gets a fair chance to operate and to do business. Now, this is one very important, reason why associations actually matter. And I thank you very much for bringing that up and spotlighting that. I'm going to come very quickly to Dr. Kweku just to give us a brief overview of what obtains in Ghana and the specific role or actions that the association has been taking in terms of some of the developments within your jurisdiction.
Thank you very much. And thank you once again for having me. It's been quite interesting listening to the other speakers and what happens in Nigeria and in Kenya as well. And I must say that it's also very refreshing, to hear that regulators are being collaborative. I must say that it is quite similar in Ghana, that regulators are now realizing that regulation is not a revolution. You can't just come and impose and go away. It is one that must evolve, and you need to get all the stakeholders on board with respect to what you intend to do, because obviously it's an industry that has a lot of stakeholders, and regulators themselves are part of the stakeholders, and of course the operators are also stakeholders in that regard. So it is similar in terms of what happens in Ghana. I must say that we have a Gaming Act, and this Gaming Act came into existence in 2006. It was primarily, if you look at the provisions of the Gaming Act, you notice that primarily geared towards the regulation of land-based casinos. But our landscape has changed significantly. I mean, today the market is dominated by sports bookmakers, and so sports betting. And then, interestingly enough, what is referred to as online casinos, have kind of dominated the market space. And in terms of what it takes to regulate the space, completely different from what pertained in 2006. And you also notice that operators have used technology to advance, if you will, the industry. And we find out that in many instances, regulators are playing, catch up. So they are realizing that, look, we need each other to sanitize, the industry. Of course, those that are licensed and are operating legally want to make sure that they protect the market in a way that do not have unlicensed black site operating in country, because as they say, one bad nut, spoils the bunch. So in essence, it's been quite interesting collaborating with the regulators to ensure that we are, sanitizing the industry. Now, specifically, our Gaming Act is undergoing review as we speak. So there's a gaming bill. Now there was a bunch of consultants that were hired to go ahead and go through the initial draft, after which, of course, it will then be the consultation, for the associations. But already, as soon as we heard about it, we quickly put together a position paper that was submitted. But beyond that, our association in Ghana, we have actually gone beyond just the gaming regulator. We call it the Gaming Commission. We've gone beyond them. And we've gone ahead to engage with all the other stakeholders that operate, within the sector. So, for instance, in terms of taxation, we've engaged quite extensively with the Ghana Revenue Authority in terms of the making of a tax policy in the gaming industry. When it comes to money laundering, for instance, the entity that is sit with is the Central Bank of Ghana, and there is, one of their subsidiaries, which is called the Financial Intelligence Center, is sit with them. We've collaborated with them quite extensively in terms of how you regulate the space. When it came to tax, the current tax regime, which we have in Ghana, and in Ghana we have, specific for gaming, we have our GGR, tax. Essentially, good. We used to have a VAT regime and then a corporate income tax regime, right? And let me say that it was the association that championed the cause, in the sense that when we had the VAT regime, there was a lot of, widespread lack of compliance when it came to the implementation of the VAT. And mostly it had to do with the technicality of how the industry itself has moved. And it was almost impracticable, for gaming companies to charge, VAT. And we advocated that, look, guys, we want to pay the tax, but the form in which it is very difficult for us to comply. Can we look at best practices elsewhere and then be able to change that? And we worked together, to abolish the VAT regime, passed an Income Tax Amendment Act in 2023 to now introduce the GGR tax. At the time, the association or the industry was not favoring, if you will, the whole withholding tax on winnings. We had tried it in the past. We had difficulties, but the regulators insisted that they wanted that. The tax authorities insisted they wanted that. And so that came into existence in 2023. and it was supposed to go live in first April of 2023. And based on the collaboration and also consultation, the association was able to delay implementation all the way to August of 2023. What we had done was that in terms of implementation, the tax authorities themselves did not have the resources and the technology to be able to enforce the application of the tax. So the association itself set up a war room to self-regulate and self-monitor. And any operator that did not go live on the 15th August deadline that we gave ourselves, we went ahead and made sure that they were offline. And so we collaborated and we sent all that information, to the regulators themselves, for which they were very, very, happy, about. So we collaborated very well in terms of the taxation. Today, we have the withholding tax is gone. So all that we have is GGI tax, which is in essence the revenue tax, and it's quite easy for the regulators to be able to monitor and ensure compliance. So just by reason of that collaboration, look, in terms of taxation, we've done tremendous well. As I speak to you now, we are working on verification. And what it is that, as you are very much aware, one of the biggest challenge that we have is having, unscrupulous persons infiltrating, our industry and, engaging in, criminal behavior. And I think one of the best ways to deal with that is to have a robust verification system, so that in the unlikely event that you have anyone using the platform for an illegal activity, they can be easily fished out. So Ghana itself, over the last couple of years, I'll say about 15 years, we've gone through a national identification system. We have now been able to perfect it as a country. We have a national identification system that uses multi-biometric system of identification, which goes beyond just fingerprint. And now it uses the iris technology. So it takes your, the eye to ensure that it cannot be duplicated and you cannot impersonate anyone. So we are now in the process of onboarding using this particular system for verification to ensure that each player that is on any platform is in essence the person that he or she claims to be. And I must add before I rest that as operators, we have also come to the realization that although we are competitors, we must agree, collaborate, to compete, because that is the only way we'll be able to advance the industry. If we are at each other's throat, of course, nothing can be done. So yes, we are competitors, but we must agree to cooperate, to compete effectively. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you. That was so insightful. I mean, for anyone who has ever wondered, why do these associations exist? What exactly do they do? As you can see from what our speakers have said, it's probably not front burner activities. It's not something you would find in the news, but they're always working in the background, always contributing to the policies that we see, and always sometimes collaborating with the government, with the lawmakers, with policymakers to ensure that the industry remains sustainable. Very important, just off the back of the Dr. Kweko's final remarks in terms of verification of operators. That's very insightful. And that takes me to the question of self-regulation, by the associations themselves. Because if as an industry continue to wait for the regulators to make the rules, that may be a challenge. As we have heard, in Nigeria, in Ghana, in Kenya as well, the laws are just being changed. They're just being modernized, but regulation still has to be, in place. So to what extent, should associations self-regulate, and in what areas can the associations self-regulate? So I'm going to bring this question actually to John. I'm coming back to you, John. In what ways do associations, or can associations self-regulate?
Thank you. It's a very interesting question because it calls for a buy-in of each and every single member, because then all of them are basically guided and brought together and work under one constitution that has been adopted for the members. Now, besides the constitution that basically guides the association, there's also rules and regulations that need to go together with that. Now, the rules and regulations now become the key driver in self-regulation, so that then within the members themselves, and I like what Kweku has said, is that there exists a very much alive competition, okay? But that competition cannot then be the only basis for having discussions. We've got to have proper rules and regulations that then allow, as much as we are competing, it has to be with a certain level of agreed fairness amongst all of us. It's like calling each one of us to order. I'll give you a personal example here in Kenya. We've had, for example, when it comes to advertising, and you will find one entity is doing something different from what other people are doing, and this is what has not been. This is what is being has been said. You cannot do this, from either the regulator or just among ourselves. So the one thing that I have seen and we do very well is, call out each other and my friend, here, come, this is a letter for you. You need to attend this session so that we can have this discussion. So then we're regulating things among ourselves so that we maintain a certain degree of competition, because you cannot just let everything flow in whichever direction it wants to flow. And I find that once you have this level of self-regulation, and this comes from an understanding with each other that yes, we subscribe and agree to these rules. Once that agreement has been set and is in place, then it becomes easy to guide all of us. And even for the association now, it becomes very easy to say, for example, you're not paying your subscriptions. If you're not meeting your subscriptions, then you're pulling everybody else back, because then it means the association is not able to meet certain obligations. Those obligations are key in achieving the goals that all of us have set out. So when we have things like this, then the association can step in and say, this cannot be done, that can be done. But the best part, and which is what I have found works the best, is that even when it comes to the regulator, the first port of call will then be the association and say, guys, can we have a discussion around this? Are you able to handle this? Can you resolve this before we go down the rabbit hole of looking at the law around it? And for me, the thing that has helped the most, and how I see it, is that out of these engagements and this collaboration, then when it comes to, for example, the regulator putting together the regulations, or when they want to do something, it's easy, for these discussions that have already been had, and for the regulator now to come and fit into that self-regulation, as opposed to the regulator then passing, having like a top-down approach. Once we've agreed among ourselves, then we know what actually works. We know what actually sits comfortable in supporting everybody's business. We know what does not actually work. Then it becomes easy when the regulator now comes into the discussion. They are finding order. They are finding an organization, an entity, an industry that is actually collaborating among themselves, and that makes life even easy, even for government. I've seen situations where when even government wants to do, and I think this is the one thing I keep saying a lot. When government wants to make changes, when government wants to do certain things, or even, for example, discourage, they approach this from two ways. It's either by taxation or a change in policy. Now, when we get down to the level of government wanting to make some of these changes as deterrents, or for example, I'll give you one very strong example we have. we've got the excise tax on deposits in Kenya. We've got the withholding tax on withdrawals, and we've got the GGR now based on the operator. And we asked our friends from the Revenue Authority, but why are you insisting on having, a tax on an excise tax on the deposits? Previously, this tax was actually based on every stake, and it had to take the association to engage government and the Revenue Authority for this change to be effected and remove the tax now from every stake to every single deposit. And what our friends from the Revenue Authority made clear was that the excise tax on deposits is actually meant to be a deterrent, to act as a deterrent on, betting. So you can see this is the point where it's either policy or taxation. And if you, as the industry, as an association, that do not have some level of, self-regulation among yourselves, it becomes a big challenge. Because the other conversation then we put forward was, yes, we are happy with that. This is how you're looking at it. But do you also realize, for example, that this same tax cannot be applicable to a land-based operator? Because a land-based operator they've already set out a place. So you choosing to go there is actually a very conscious personal choice that I am making, that I want to go to the casino today at this hour. So already that alone becomes a deterrent, so that now brought in, a different understanding from our friends sitting in government and even the regulator. And they're thinking, yeah, actually, this does make sense. So let us now look at how do we also have a tax that actually addresses this specific sector on its own. Like I said before, that the fact that we are able to collaborate together as competitors gives us a certain edge that allows us to have even stronger conversations with the regulator and with government because of self-regulation among ourselves. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you very much. That's actually truly insightful. And what you said about self-regulation should precede policy, should precede regulation is actually very true, which brings me to the topic of responsible gaming, and then strengthening consumer protection and promoting greater public confidence in the industry. Now, Gift, what has been the moves or effort of your association? And I know you generally tend to work collaboratively with the lottery and casino associations as well. What has been the contributions in terms of responsible gaming? Because this is something that for now is not perhaps being pushed through law or legislation, not fully, not completely. But it's something that has become a matter that's become a front burner issue, especially in various African markets. So how and in what areas is the association contributing to self-regulation in this regard?
Okay, thank you very much, Ma. I'd say firstly, responsible gaming is fundamental to long-term sustainability of this industry, and it's also gives consumers the trust in the industry once we have that in place. Now, at the association, we believe that responsible gaming should be embedded in every organization, every licensed operators organization, and as an association as well, we position ourselves to develop industry-wide initiative that promotes player protection, consumer education, and ethical advertising standard. Here we work with organization which we do trainings for our licensed operators and members, and also we also have opportunities to speak in a larger crowd on these issues about it. I strongly believe that the association should promote standard that goes beyond the minimum requirements prescribed by law, but these regulations also sets the baselines. But with self-regulation, it demonstrates leadership amongst the operators through voluntary code of conduct and industry guideline, as Mr. John has said. It also encourages our members to adopt higher standards of transparency, responsible marketing, data protection, and whatnot. Through this the self-regulation, we also it should not be viewed as replacing the government oversight, but rather it should be seen as to complement it. A well-functioning industry works when operators take collective responsibility for maintaining high standards. And while regulators provide the oversight, the association also establish expectations for their members to monitor adherence and to also see that these standards are being complied to by members. That's why, as I said, the association bring up trainings for operators. We also have situations where our operators also do these trainings in-house for their staff and their company. So it's not just the association doing this. The operators also take this compliance in-house and ensure that this confidence is not just being spoken out to operators, but also put out there to their staff, while also speaking to customers when they get complaints from customers.
Right. Thank you very much for that contribution. Now, I want to touch on, the dynamics and the relationship between regulators and associations. I mean, John, every speaker actually has laid a foundation in terms of, we work collaboratively, we discuss, and then we have conversations, engagements, and voila. It seems like all is well, between the associations and the regulators. But are there situations where it becomes necessary, for instance, to call out the regulators, when during engagement, perhaps as we have seen in places like Kenya, in South Africa, there was introduction of fiscal reforms, and the association and the industry has been, all out there just opposing this. At what point, or are there even circumstances or situations that would warrant the associations being the voice of the industry and standing publicly, against some of these policies or measures that are being introduced by government? I'm going to bring this one to Chima, and maybe we can take a bit of lessons from Ghana as well, but we'll go with Chima first. Yeah.
Okay. Regulators and the association. It should be a mutual respect, a mutual collaboration, because the association is there to protect the interests of the operators. The regulator is there to protect the interests of the government and the people, and also to make money for the government. But there are times we need to, which has happened in Nigeria some few years back. There was a law that said, came from somewhere in our own sector, where we pay a certain percentage to our own sector, the land-based 590 games is structured on percentages, and suddenly we had a case where we had to about 11% extra was imposed, and we fought it collectively until we made sure that thing everybody saw that it couldn't be done. And even recently with the when you talk about regulators, we talk about the people regulating us as gaming operators, but what of the tax authority? Mm-hmm. In Nigeria, the data protection, consumer protection, all those are regulators in quotes also over the industry. And recently we had such an issue over the tax, and right, we had to make them see, just like the one that happened in Ghana. That I remember when Nigeria was doing the tax reform, we had a series of conversation that at what point do you determine the tax, the earning, the winning of a staker, to tax him, to take VAT on the winning, and we were able to argue that out. And as the other point you made about self-regulation, I know that operators in Nigeria started deducting and remitting withholding tax on agents even before the government knew. Up to now, I'm not sure they know how to go about it. It was the operators that found a way to do it. So it should be collaboration, but sometimes we in Nigeria have had to stand out, take our stand, quarreled publicly, privately, and then reconcile. Because some of the things we see as operators, regulators can't see it. They are not in the field. They don't experience it. There are backends of operators that regulators might never get to see. And until they see those things, they will take decisions that might not favor the operator or might even kill the operator's business. I was telling somebody in Enugu about 2 weeks ago that when we had that issue of unfair percentage imposed on us, in our sector we had about 26 or 29 companies. As of today, we don't have up to 8 companies operating from that list because series of regulations and government policies came up and a lot of people couldn't just survive anymore. So yes, regulators should be, when we identify the ones we need to deal with, and we collaborate with them peacefully. When it doesn't work, we now come up with other measures to sort it out.
You now come out publicly. Okay.
Yes, thank you.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to come to Dr. Kweku now. I know that we found it very interesting. Maybe you can shed a bit of clarity on this. The issue of withholding tax on winnings, it became such a public matter that it actually became an election campaign matter in Ghana. So at what point does engagement have to go public with the government, regulators, data protection, Financial Crimes Commission, and things like that?
Thank you very much. And it's interesting that you point out to the blowout that we had in Ghana with respect to the withholding tax. Now, if you had followed, you would have realized that indeed there was a player revolt. But as operators and as an association, we decided to keep quiet and not to take sides, in the matter. Even though I must say, in honesty, that we're, quite happy and we felt vindicated, because at the time that the government was introducing this withholding tax, we fought it. We told them that was not going to work and insisted that it should not be implemented. And let me say that against all advice, they decided we're going to go ahead with it. At the time that we realized that we couldn't change their minds, then we said, okay, fine, why don't we negotiate on the rate of taxation? And we did that and essentially agreed that the withholding tax should be 5%. And so with the technical people, that was the agreement that we had. But by the time that the law had passed in Parliament, it had changed to 10%. And that is when, the revolt truly started. And here, the revolt was not, as it were, at the association, but by the players. And interestingly, the data that we have shows that at the time, we had more than 5 million active, players. These are unique players on betting platforms. And if you have a voter population that at the time was about 12, 13 million thereabout, and you have 5 million people that are active players, then of course you can imagine when there's a tax that directly affect them, how they are going to react. But I must say that on this one, as it turned out, I will score it 50-50. In terms of the fact that we had indicated to the regulator that as soon as you have a withholding tax, it was going to reduce whatever tax or income that the state was going to get, from the industry. And we told them also that it was going to now push a lot of the players to the black side, all these unregulated online sites, But we also found out, interestingly, that the demand, for gaming product is essentially price inelastic. So even though it had become quite expensive, we didn't see, the gaming behavior, change significantly. So in actual fact, even though it became more expensive for players, GGR values did not change significantly. The taxes also did not change, significantly. But of course, the players were just not happy, about it. And that is how it found its way into the political campaign the very year after. And, the then opposition promised that as soon as they win, in fact, they called it a nuisance tax. And I said as soon as they win, they were going to scrap it. And indeed, in 2024, in fact, 2025, when the new government was sworn in, one of the first taxes that is scrapped was this withholding tax on gaming. That's correct. But I must say that we haven't, as of now, had to call them out publicly, that's the regulators. We have had very uncomfortable conversations, but they have all been behind doors. I recall that the Gaming, Commission, what we term pulling a fast one on us, we realized that they had introduced a 3% fee on as a monitoring system. So, and that monitoring fee was going to be a percentage of GGR. And we said, no, you cannot do that. If you want to monitor, it should be a fixed fee. We are happy to pay for it, but it cannot be a percentage of our GGR. I mean, it was very unpleasant. We had a lot of difficult conversations, a bit of shouting here and there and all that. But at the end of the day, all of it had happened behind closed doors. We have worked very well together. And I think at the height of our cooperation, we do have a standing board subcommittee of the Gaming Commission, which is made up of both, folks in the gaming industry, the Gaming Commission, and then folks also from the association as well. So that is our level of cooperation. But I must say that we've also had very difficult ones. We've called out names. It's been private. We fight, and then we find a way, it's like a marriage. We find a way to get back to each other because we need each other. We need each other. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much for that. Thank you. It's been interesting just listening and learning about the dynamics in the various, countries, Kenya, Ghana, and Nigeria. We're fast running out of time, but we have to ask this question, right? Emerging issues, that trade associations should be preparing their members for. Now we hear about AI, data protection is becoming a thing, cross-border regulation conversations are coming up. We're talking about financial crimes, for instance, in Nigeria. I know that the FATF identified the gaming sector as one of the sectors, that was quote unquote responsible for Nigeria being on the grey list. And it took a lot of concerted effort, on the part of the industry, working with the financial regulators to ensure that Nigeria came off that list. Now, more and more, we see AI now. We see data protection, privacy becoming issues. We even see problem gambling becoming, front burner issues in our various markets. How do associations help operators to understand that there is a point where business and responsibility have to be balanced, commercial interests and responsibility have to be balanced? So I would come to you, Gift, on this one.
Thank you very much for that question. I would say the association must always look ahead. Our role is not just to respond to today's regulatory issues, but also to help our members prepare for tomorrow's risks and opportunity. Now, as the gaming industry evolves, association must also equip operators with the knowledge and tools to remain compliant and competitive in the industry. Now, for AI, I would say it's transforming customer engagement, fraud detection, compliance, and responsible gaming and whatnot. But as this is transforming the information I just shared now, the association should also guide members on the responsible and ethical use of AI while preparing them for the regulatory expectations. How do the association come in into this? This is where the trainings come in. Luckily for us, we have the data protection NDPC, the Nigerian Data Protection Commission, who handles or who regulates this part of the industry. We have trainings with them, and of recent, we just concluded the first batch of a training with the NDPC. Coming up, there's another batch coming up too, which we had some operators join in that training. Now, also on data protection and cyber security, this equally too is a critical area because we operators, we handle lots of data from the industry. And while we do that, we need to be very careful in that aspect. And regulatory compliance comes into this part. We also have to maintain consumers' trust. Recently, I had, I believe we are aware of the Zenith Bank issue with a breach in their system and whatnot. So this can happen to any operator too. But when operators understand that this can happen and also they are prepared to issues like this, it gives the industry a confidence. It gives consumers confidence about the industry. You also spoke about responsible gaming. I want to say that should not just be a compliant thing for operators and for the association. This should be something we need to embed in. It should be a culture for us right now because expectations are shifting beyond compliance towards protecting players. The association should be champions on voluntary standards, responsible advertising, and enhanced age verification. Also consumer education, and also the use of technology to identify and support players at risk. So I'll say association should not just be advocacy association, but also champions of these tools or these emerging issues in the industry. I think I should let them. Yes.
Thank you so much, Gibbs. Thank you for that contribution. John, any addition to what she has said?
Gift has said it very well.
Yes.
What more can you add on to that? But I think there's just to emphasize on something else that she did point out. Besides the advocacy work that the association does, I think it also behooves all associations to be able to prepare their members for certain things, so that bring them together to be able to discuss certain things and find solutions way ahead. I'll give you an example. Under the current Gambling Control Act, there are quite a number for Kenya. There are quite a number of things that have been laid out as requirements. And one of the things that the association actually took up last year, immediately the act was assented to by the president, we picked up that there's two things that are required as you apply for your license, to either have a bank guarantee as a security or an insurance security bond. So what we did at that point was begin to engage with the different insurance companies in the country, operating in the country, licensed to operate in the country, so then they can start preparing this product. And the thing we found that as we spoke to a lot of these insurance companies, the reaction was almost the same for all of them. They were like, this is new for us. We do not know about this product. It's not something we've ever offered before. We need to talk to, other people outside of the country to our reinsurers, so that we can try and and it took the whole of almost 6-7 months for us to even get an offering on this. Now, this was the association taking the initiative to prepare something for its members, as opposed to waiting at the last meeting and then everybody's running helter-skelter and wondering, how does this come together? Bring in it took a lot of meetings and education to actually get the insurance companies to understand what we were trying to say, what we were trying to achieve, and what the regulator would then be looking at. So for me, that made a lot of, it's a big comfort point for, the members of the association. Another conversation, and I like that you pointed it out, is the FATF, the Financial Action Task Force. As you will already know, Kenya has been on that grey list. I think Nigeria did manage to get out of that. So we are doing a lot at the moment. There's a lot of collaboration with the FRC locally, so that then we are able to start looking at all these anti-money laundering laws, and how do we actually articulate and position ourselves to be able to meet the conditions, but to also show the FATF that guys, we've taken this very seriously. The gaming has been pointed as one of the sources, and we've actually managed to sort this out. So what we did, I remember, like even last year, we did a collaborative training between the FRC, which is a financial resource center that basically is like your financial intelligence unit locally, the FRC, then the GRA as well, and then with the association, we brought in everybody, member or not. Come, let's sit in one table, one room, go through this level of training, so that even as now other people are looking at, has Kenya been able to achieve 1, 2, 3, 4? When it comes to the gaming side, we've actually taken action and we've done something, and it's not just ticking a box. It's actually equipping the individual members with the specific fixes that they can actually deploy in their own organizations to be able to meet the needs that have been laid out. So I agree that there's quite a lot that can be done, and you need to do these things by forward looking. We cannot continue to be reactive. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you for that contribution. On that note, if anyone has got questions, please do well to ask them now. And if you want to ask, you could raise your hand, even though we're fast running out of time. We've actually run out of time. But just off of the back of what John has said in terms of being on the FATF list, perhaps there's some learning from you, in Nigeria. So you could talk to your colleagues from Nigeria. They could learn from that. And also for the Nigerian colleagues, in terms of what he has said about that bank guarantee and working with the insurance companies, perhaps there are lessons for you as well to take off from that, instead of having to tie down capital, in a bank that could probably be used by your members in their business. Having said that, that then brings up the issue of collaboration. Are there areas where you see, because I've just pointed out one, I'm going to get my consulting fee from both Kenya and the Nigerian representatives later, but are there other areas where there could potentially be collaboration, where we could take learnings from fellow associations? We understand that yes, the markets are different, but the truth is that we all face, bottom line, the same issue at the end of the day. So are there learnings, are there areas that we could collaborate? Let me give that to Dr. Kweku and maybe Mr. Chima, if you could. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for that. Absolutely, there is a lot of areas for collaboration. As you indicated, yes, the market may be different, regulation different, but at the end of the day, it's all gaming. And if there's gaming, then there will be stakes and there will be payouts. and there will be GGR, and that cuts across everywhere. That's what it is. So I think indeed there's a lot of there's a lot of importance in collaborating. And I must say that a lot of the work that we have done in Ghana, we have actually looked at what had happened elsewhere. In fact, when it came to our withholding tax issues, we kept on pointing to Kenya and what had happened in Kenya, and we looked at what was happening in South Africa as well. So certainly this conversation, I think, is very timely, and it's good to meet fellow colleagues, and it will not hurt to put together or have something of an association of African associations. I don't know whatever we're going to call it, but certainly there needs to be some kind of a platform for us to collaborate and share information. I think our work was made easier when we were able to put together position papers and then point out benchmark information from other African countries to see what works and what doesn't work. And I must say that today the regulators do have a platform across the African continent, and the regulators are comparing notes. And so if the regulators are comparing notes, then certainly we as operators also need to compare notes in a way that will advance the industry in a much more responsible way. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you so much. Chima, very quickly, we have a question, but I would allow you go before I read out the question we have. Yes.
A quick one. What you said about the insurance, and it's very instructive, because a few years back I saw an operator going down, and all he needed was for the banks to understand the gaming industry. And that was the first time that word came, insurance. The word the man used, or that was used there, was an insurance pool for the gaming industry. But it didn't quite sink in there. But having heard it from him, it's an area to collaborate. And like Dr. Kwekwe said, we need, as associations, to also come together to look forward, be more proactive than being responsive to things that are coming up. Let's be proactive in looking at them and then dealing with them before they happen. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. And in case you want to set up that association of associations, come sit with us. It's what we do. It's what we do best. We'll come up with a name for it and everything else you need. Yeah, so we have a question here actually from Peter. Peter actually is the CEO of Africa iGaming Alliance, and they've been doing a bit of work on the continent as well. First, he extends his appreciation. In fact, his appreciation is what I'm going to end this session with. But his question is, there's often a fine line between representing industry interest and advancing public interest. In your view, what governance principles should an industry association adopt to ensure that policymakers and regulators see it as a trusted policy partner rather than simply an effective lobbying organization? Okay. Put differently, how do we build institutional credibility that endures beyond individual leaders and remains trusted by governments, regulators, and the public? That is the crux of our conversation, actually. The part that the associations play. Does anybody want to take that? He's asking, how do we position associations as trusted policy partners so that perhaps government institutions, other regulators, the industry regulators, and other complementary regulators also see us as, the first line to come to before introducing policies or taking actions beyond just seeing associations as lobby groups?
I want to try that, if you permit me.
Okay.
Okay, good. So thank you very much. And I think it's a very, very good question, as a matter of fact. And I tell myself that gaming, especially in Africa, is an industry that does not have a constituency, if you can put it that way. Okay, there are a lot of people that gamble, but very few are ready to stand up in public and defend it. So even for the sustainability of the industry itself, there will have to be standards. It cannot be just to push for the growth, for an unlimited growth of the industry. In Ghana, we have started a conversation and it's being championed by the association. We have said that, look, regulators, do not go ahead and continue to give licenses as if it is an infinite, product, and that there's a size to the market. We need to be able to determine what is the size of our market in a way that ensure that the kind of limits that we have on advertising. You cannot advertise near schools, you cannot advertise during a certain time of the day, and all that. How can we do it in a way that you have not a whole lot of, players, or let me say operators, in a way that will ensure that we have like a race to the bottom, kind of activity. So yes, we are a lobby group, but we're also looking at the public policy, part of it. We are championing also underage gambling. As a matter of fact, in Ghana, is the operators that have gone to the regulator to say that, guys, we need to set up a responsible gaming fund. We need to have, a self-banning platform so that players that are overbetting, we can go ahead and take them off. If I take them off my platform, they should not be able to go to another platform, and then place a bet, as well. So we are recognizing that there's actually a limit, to gaming. That's what it is. We say in Ghana that gaming is actually it's supposed to be entertainment. It's fun. It's for the love of the game. Okay, betting is for the love of the game and not a business in that regard. Although a lot of people, a lot of players and others see it as if it's a business. So we cannot sit for the regulators to take that decision. We need to be at the forefront of that, driving policy, looking at the limits of gaming, looking at how we curb, if you will, the bad sides of gaming and not let the regulator come to us. And I think that the more we do that, the more we become credible, as a policy partner and not an entity that is only interested in making money. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Okay.
Can I add something in a minute?
Final words, yes. Please.
Yes, please. In terms of making the associations the first line of call and establishing credibility, I think the first thing for we as associations is to be transparent. One, in our the transparent and objective in what we oppose and what we propose, not just for the benefit of our people, but for the benefit of the people. And then we need to be research prone, have our facts and data correct, that when somebody or an organization, a regulator is looking for an information concerning the industry, we will be the first point of call. That way, we are showing capability, we are showing strength, and sometimes we might need to call out our own people, challenge them in issues so that people will know it is not about making money, but it's about the good of the industry. So we need to be transparent, we need to be firm, we need to speak out even to our own members, to caution them when they do wrong, so that government and other agencies will see us as a true point of call for issues concerning the industry.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you for that. John, you have your hands up, but I've got a question here. I'm just going to add that to it, so perhaps you could address that as well. From a player support perspective, do the associations cross-continent intend to unify efforts to ensure intervention, treatment, support becomes mandatory for member operators? Now, this is from a responsible gaming organization. Fisayo, is asking that question. Do we intend to make it mandatory on a cross-continental basis, for our member operators to ensure that there's intervention and treatment support? Do we intend to make that mandatory? Yeah, John, you had your hand up.
Yeah, so, thank you.
Yes,
I think I just wanted, I just wanted to add on to what Chima was saying on the angle of transparency. because with that, transparency is critical, for government to believe in what we as associations are doing. But more important is also the fidelity to the rule of law. You have got to understand what the law says, and due process must be followed at every point, so that whoever it is that is out of line, whether it's government or it's the associations or the operators, then must be brought back. And I think this ties back to the question you were asking, and I know my colleague Dr. Kweku was very diplomatic about it, where the question around at what point do associations then engage publicly with the regulators, and I think it must be pointed out that for so long as all of us, whether government or the operators or the associations, maintain fidelity to the rule of law, then there's no need for calling out anybody in public. But should you go against that, I promise you, the associations will not hesitate to take up matters in court, so that then that distinction is brought out. And I want to thank Dr. Kweku for being very diplomatic about that, because it's one of the things a lot of us have learned to do, had to do, be extremely diplomatic, behind the scenes to try to achieve certain results without any antagonization or any friction. So that friction must be removed, because then that way nobody wants really to be dressed down in public. But the fidelity to rule of law, that all of us must remember that. Now, on Fisayo's question, is a very pertinent issue at the moment. And I think this also builds back to what has been said. For example, when you find all the regulators do come together under one umbrella, and they try to do and understand things and compare notes here and there. And I think it behooves us as also the associations to try and look at things now on similar platforms. Because when we're talking about, and I like the discussion, when you're talking about tax, you will be looking at the different jurisdictions and what has been done, what has been achieved. I know Kenya, for example, has managed to get the 5% excise tax on deposits and 5% withholding tax on withdrawals. And in this year's national budget, Tanzania has adopted something similar, so there's a lot of comparison points that can be shared that will basically help. And this is the same thing when it comes to on the issue that Fisayo points out. We can compare notes, because there's a way, for example, we will be talking about player protection here and offering support. Right now, we're in discussions with different stakeholders. We have what is called the Social Health Authority in Kenya, that basically provides handles health matters for citizens, for the government. But you've first got to pay, some minimal amount, and then government will then be able to, sort that out. And I know these are conversations that are happening in different parts of the continent, in different countries. So the question here is, how then do we provide that assistance? Because then one country will have been successful in one thing. We can learn from that one, and then build a continent-wide, template that can be adopted, because it's the same problem. Right now, we are talking to a few people who provide help and assistance to punters in this field, doctors, psychiatrists, psychologists. But there's the one question that then remains on who's going to pay for that medical, cover for this person that then needs to be treated. Sometimes that treatment isn't just a phone call away. That treatment might actually sometimes require some rehabilitation. Who is going to cover for that rehabilitation? Now, those are the conversations that I think we need to have and compare and see. For example, here in Kenya, we are building that into the Social Health Authority, so that then SHA, is able to cover for that, the operators then can identify, some service providers who will then form like a panel, and we can keep now referring the operators who are now our members, where they have incidences or encounters where people who will require further assistance, they can then be referred to proper medical attention, assistance under a government paid for program. So these are, I think, are conversations that we need to have around the continent, and find a model or a template that we can basically all of us work around. You can tweak depending on the laws in your country, but I think the template can be the same, that will basically provide help to people, because this is like one critical thing as we speak. And I want to point out, like last year in Kenya, we did have a massive issue, when people went out, it was a big conversation in public on responsible gambling.
Yes.
And out of the public outcry, the government actually shut down all advertising, and we had to have a lot of conversations with the government and through the regulator for us to come to an understanding. And out of that understanding, the operators actually pooled resources together, and we ran a campaign on both radio, TV, all over. We've actually, this month, we've just finished, we've just concluded a digital version of the same on Meta, Google, letting people know that what you're engaging in is entertainment. Let it not be a substitute to your normal income. Let it not be an alternative, knowing that you've not paid your month's rent and you think you can win a bet to pay that rent. Asking people to just take control of their own betting, and we've pushed that quite a lot. And these are templates also that can be replicated across. Exactly. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you, John. Thank you. And on that note, I would like to thank each and every one of our speakers, John, Chima, Kweku, and Gift, for your insightful contributions. Yes, associations are not generally front burner issues, but they are the ones who carry, for the industry. They carry the policy, the responsibility of engendering public trust, of the policymakers, of the regulators, as a matter of fact, of every stakeholder in the gaming industry. I hope our participants who have stayed with us have taken a lot away from this conversation. We appreciate your attending this webinar, and we, hope that it drives home our objective, which is to ensure that we are enlightened about this industry and we understand that it is indeed a business beyond the public perception that we have. Thank you all so much for coming. And from myself and the Select Africa team, would like to wish you all an enjoyable rest of the day. And hopefully, God willing, we come together again next month, where we bring you another insightful session. Thank you. Thank you all so much.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Slack.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Gift. Yeah.